We switched back over, jumped into a Best Ball Mania 5 draft. We get the 105. It's a fun spot to pick out of, Sean. I haven't gotten it a lot. Seems to me like Jefferson has kind of fallen out of that top 5 tier for most people, and you're almost always faced with Jefferson or Amon-Ra at the 5 if you're there. Again, I've only had it like a couple times. Probably my least assigned spot.
Well, it's interesting because this is actually the spot you and I had the last time that we drafted, and we had to make that decision.
And we took Jefferson. It's that's the only other time I think I've had this spot recently. But the first 3 picks are McCaffrey, Lamb, Chase, Hill goes 4th. We're in the same spot. I'll leave it up to you. I mean, I think I made a case for Jefferson last time, but I don't mind going any direction here.
Well, let's go Jefferson again. I do think that the difference between, I think that Jordan Addison is going to have a huge season. It'll be interesting to track TJ Hawkinson. Ben, I've actually taken him a couple times recently because he fell unbelievably far in my draft. And so I will be interested at some point here to ask you kind of where you would take Hawkinson. Well, how much time you think he might miss? Obviously, that's a question that's sort of loaded because we can't know, but sort of what you're thinking from that perspective, what your price would need to be to get him. But with the Lions, you have Jahmyr Gibbs and you have Jameson Williams. We talked a lot earlier in this long show. For anybody who's listening to the full thing, it's in the shorts if you're kind of listening to them as you go along, about Bo Nix and the upside there. How different do you see the situation with the Vikings, and how much do you think Sam Darnold / JJ McCarthy hurt Justin Jefferson? Because obviously if that's not the case, he's right there in the mix with Lamb and Tyreek Hill.
I don't think it's as damning as the market seems to. I'm concerned about it, but I think having both the QBs helps the floor. I would say this with some other teams sometimes, but I do think it's true. I don't think Darnold's a horrible quarterback. I think if McCarthy is completely overmatched, you can go to Darnold, and that's why they brought him in. I do think the Vikings are, going to be worse than people expect, or maybe some people, but others maybe not. But will still be like a decent offense on a bad team, if that makes sense. Like they're going to probably lose a decent amount of games, but I do think Kevin O'Connell's a pretty good coach. They've stayed pretty stable with their approach offensively. We talked a little bit about this on ship chasing and the way, as I was trying to make this point, Pat Kerrane put it, is that O'Connell's floor is sort of like a 0% pass rate over expected, where like he like makes it a point to at least throw the right amount. Like he doesn't go really run heavy and go into the real negative. So we are up here in the middle of the second round as well. I'm comfortable anywhere you go. You are not very high on Adams. I'm not super high on Ayuk. What do you think here?
Do you want to go Waddle again?
I'm always happy to take Waddle. Yeah, I think he's a smash pick in this range. Because especially if something were to happen to Tyreek Hill, we talked about this last year about the contingent upside. And then when Hill missed a game, Waddle had like 140 yards and a touchdown. I mean, he was really good late in the year.
What happened in week 16 last year after that 50-yard reception?
For Waddle?
Yeah.
That's the game that Tyreek Hill missed, right?
I shouldn't be bringing it up. I'm thinking of the emotional devastation of getting that early big score that it put us in the mix to win the main event, and then
nothing the rest of the game. Yeah, that was that was week 15, so it was the beginning of the 3-week sprint. But things I think were already going pretty well for us at that point, somehow or another. He went 8 for 142 in a TD, but it felt like he was going to get 300 yards in that game. But yeah, he had a 60-yard touchdown to start. And then...
But in the...
Oh, are you talking about week 16 when he had a 50-yard catch right away and then no other catches the rest of the game?
And then got injured. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the game. Yeah. He only had one catch in that game. That one, Hill was back for. But either way, Waddle has massive contingent upside. like that's the theory, is that like, McDaniel can get the ball to his guys, and if Hill were to miss time, then he's gonna get to Waddle. Anyway, we are
But
back up. Malik Neighbors makes it back.
One of the reasons I had suggested Waddle was I think that Neighbors was my next ranked guy, but I thought he might come through. He did here. We have 10 seconds. You were gonna push for him, right?
Yes. Malik Neighbors is the pick. I mean, I have a lot of Waddle Neighbors teams. I started like in the big board when they were both like clear 3rd round picks. When I had like the 101 or 102, I was like, I don't want to take any of these other guys, so I'll just take Waddle and Neighbors back to back and pull them both up by like 5 picks. You don't always get it now because Waddle's a clear 2nd round pick now, but you get Neighbors here at 305. I mean, I don't think these prices are I think Neighbors is gonna get too expensive too at some point, probably, or I don't know. I don't have a problem continuing to load up the Waddle and Neighbors bags, and the 3 receiver start gives you the flexibility you need. Yeah, it's a good start. It's a fun team.
One of the reasons that I had recommended Jefferson was that you had suggested you weren't as excited about the 49ers players, and that's the natural pick back in round 2 if you've selected Amon-Ra to start. So I didn't want to push that. The other thing about Jefferson that I really like is that the playoff stretch is Chicago, Seattle, Green Bay, and that allows us to take our favorite guys kind of as we work through. The thing that I kind of blew after mentioning it in our eliminator show, and it's not as big a deal here, but still definitely relevant, is that I did get us 2 receivers there with week 6 buys right off the bat. So we'll want to keep a little bit of an eye out for that the rest of the way. The other week 6 players are the Chiefs and the Rams, which it's a bummer to have Xavier Worthy, maybe not as a good pick. But Ben,
I don't
is
have
there
as
a
much
bigger
of a
upside start
concern
than Justin Jefferson, Jalen Waddle, and Malik Neighbors?
No, I don't know if there is, and I don't have as big of a concern about that note personally for Best Ball Mania, where Xavier Worthy, if he's the right pick at 505, I'd be comfortable taking him and just taking a 3rd week 6, because it is total points in the first 14 weeks to advance to week 15. If you do have a really poor wide receiver week in week 6, it's not going to eliminate you necessarily. I think all things equal, that looking at the bye weeks is still a reasonable thing to do. But anyway, I just wanted to, because the Chiefs are a fun team to play. I think you still want to think about getting exposure to the Chiefs offense if it makes sense. We are almost back on the clock. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, we're back. Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, T. Higgins. Higgins, the best value by ADP. We don't necessarily even lose Kincaid if we go Higgins here. It's always tough for me to pass on McBride, but Higgins?
I think, I'd take McBride more than anyone. We just took him in our last draft. Higgins is he's kind of the tier break for me at receiver here, where both Christian Kirk and George Pickens, I think, also went off before him, but he is, to me, in a tier above those guys. And once Higgins goes,
and Amari Cooper, who is in that tier below as well, I would say.
Right. Yes. And so once Higgins goes, and obviously Zay Flowers and Tank Dell and those guys go, that's when for me it becomes a tight end pick. But if I get the chance to take Higgins at 408, like we just did, then the 5th round is an easy one to just say, okay, well, if Dalton Kincaid and Mark Andrews has already gone off, that's part of why Higgins went. But if Dalton Kincaid and Trey McBride go before the 5th round, we can just push up Kyle Pitts. Like, I'm okay with taking Kyle Pitts at 505. That's sort of where my mentality is when I take Higgins there, Sean. We don't have to do that either, but because it's tough then to expect like Kittle to come back in the late 6th. And so it pushes the elite tight end decision to the 505 when you take Higgins there. But I'm always fine just going, okay, I'll take Pitts there, because Pitts is should be going at the 505 anyway, but he's always there because his ADP is actually like 6 or 8 picks further from that spot. Anyway, are you thinking about that similarly, or would you want to go another receiver? It also is a spot where I tend to go Xavier Worthy, But now that we've gone 4 straight receivers, we don't have that week 6 issue. Man, both those tight ends came around the turn, but they went 502, 503 in the picks before us. Jalen Hurts is still on the board. Okay, he goes the pick before us as well. I'm not seeing anything that would get me off of just reaching for Pitts. Did you agree with that take of mine, or do you want to go a different direction here?
No, I think that works.
Is there a better pick for you?
I think that Keenan Allen is interesting there.
Yeah, we could have taken Allen. That would have been fine. But you already clicked Pitts before mentioning that. But yeah, the top of the queue for people just listening was Terry McLaurin, Josh Jacobs, Hollywood Brown. Keenan Allen was 4th. Obviously, those first 3 names are not ones we're really targeting. I don't know about you on Hollywood Brown, but I think he's a little bit priced up right now, and the week 6 bye makes him tough on this build. But Keenan would have fit. The other like small ADP values were a couple quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud. They were like right around their ADP, or maybe even slightly a little bit before, but they were near the top of the queue as well. We take Pitts 8.8 picks ahead of ADP. I do think you're right that Keenan could have fit there. But I think you probably agree with me that Pitts is a value at 61.8, right? And so taking him at 53 is not a major concern.
Yeah, he's probably not going to get back. And I like the possibility of being able to get both Pitts and Kittle, which requires you to, with our draft slot, and the vast majority of draft slots, obviously, it's going to require you to reach on one of them or get a pretty crazy value on one of them. And so we've set it up nicely here to be able to potentially get both. There are some additional, kind of fun picks that could come into this area in terms of an Adunze. One of the reasons that I have so much Walker is that he's undervalued and fits into a spot where you already know that you've gotten your receiver start that you wanted. And so that's another name that often ends up in play for me here.
The opportunity cost is different in this pocket too, because you don't have to give up like the JSN pick. I like JSN alongside Deontay Johnson and Rashee Rice, but the receivers that go in the Kenneth Walker range are the more questionable rookies. You probably put Adunze in that group, but you have him in the queue. I appreciate you putting Adunze in the queue for me. But once he's off the board, you're talking about Ladd McConkey, and he did just go Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, Brian Thomas, that group. I know you're getting into Brian Thomas more. If you want to consider him here, I'd be very open to that. I like the Pitts Kittle idea. We're a couple picks away now. There won't be very many Pitts, Kittle, Justin Jefferson, like with a top 5 receiver. We do get Kittle going there. But there frankly won't even, I don't know, maybe Pitts' price will rise later, but I don't think there'll be a lot of Pitts with the top 5 picks either. Well, it's one of the cool things about pulling him up. He's been sitting right at that turn, doesn't fall deep into the 6th, doesn't usually go high in the 5th. Anyway, we are up. Kittle did go. Ladd McConkey went. I like the Walker play personally, but if you want to go with Brian Thomas, we can definitely do that.
Well, Walker helps us balance the roster a little bit. He gives us the week 16 off of Jefferson, which is kind of fun. And from the perspective of that, it's a home game for Seattle. They could win that in a blowout. He could score a bunch of touchdowns. You get Justin Jefferson chasing in the second half. Obviously, you're telling a very specific story there, but you have that set up properly. That's one of the things that I mentioned as an element that I liked from the Minnesota first round pick to start with. And we've gotten some good prices on Neighbors, Higgins, and Walker, which helps to balance out that Kyle Pitts ADP reach.
For sure. I really like this start. The 4 early receivers, get Pitts in the 5th. It's, again, the ADP element, not great on Pitts, but it's a unique spot in the draft. where you have to make a decision before tier break there. Although I know you have Bowers probably ranked back-to-back with Pitts, so maybe it's not such a tier break for you. Deontay Johnson, Rashee Rice go here at the 6-7 turn, which makes, JSN coming back to us a little bit precarious. If he doesn't, we're still 3 picks away. I feel like that's a pretty big tier break there at wide receiver as well. I think the next receiver by ADP is Christian Watson. And Jameson Williams is one that you talked about in this range of our last draft. It feels early for me, but you're still pretty in on the Jameson Williams upside case.
Yeah, and partly I think that Jameson Williams is overvalued and yet also a really strong piece potentially for the format. And so he's one of those guys where if you're going to tell me I have to reach on him, I'm pretty comfortable doing that. Ben, what's happened here is that Brian Thomas has come all the way through.
Oh, okay. Let's take him. Yeah, I can't see. You have the other window up, so I can't.
Do you want to see who?
Yeah. So that's the name that it seemed like there was one name not on the board. I was looking at the draft board that whole time. So when JSN did go and when that whole tier went, the one guy who slid through is Brian Thomas. I'm very in. Yeah. At pick 77, you can get me into Brian Thomas. I initially made the case that I thought he was overvalued when he was in the 60s and going before like the end of the elite tight ends, before Kittle. And then I do believe that I would, in a vacuum, take that Deontay, Rashee Rice, and Jackson Smith and Jigba group ahead of Brian Thomas and Ladd and Keon Coleman. I think those guys should be going, the rookies should be going behind that trio of veterans. But Thomas does go there in this draft, and there are upside cases to be made. And Thomas's ADP has slid into the 70s, and now we get him behind ADP. Even for a guy who's not a big Brian Thomas guy, like 77 is an obviously fine spot to be taking him. I can definitely talk myself into the, humility-based drafting of like, yeah, maybe I just have the profile wrong. Right. And so,
this has turned into a pretty good draft from an ADP perspective, even with that big Kyle Pitts reach, because the rest of the picks have gone very nicely.
They have. My main point there is I shouldn't be able to draft Brian Thomas because I think I'm the biggest bear on Brian Thomas there is. And he shouldn't get to a price where I'm then saying, yeah, he makes sense. I mean, that just seems wrong, right? Like if you're out on a guy, usually you have to tell yourself that you have to reach just to get some exposure. Like last year, I thought DJ Moore was going too high and he never really came down and I never really got any exposure. And I wanted to be taking DJ Moore, but I wanted to get him at better prices and it just never happened. And it was like, man, like this is a bummer. Something I battled all year. I thought I was going to be there with Brian Thomas, but to start to get some of these prices like 77, I've taken him in some of my own drafts as well in the mid 70s. It's kind of nice because I think at that price, I don't have an issue with it anymore. I'm not gonna make a big negative Brian Thomas point at that price.
And we've been talking about some of these offenses that support the 3 receivers. Doug Peterson offenses have done that. I know that you're high on Christian Kirk. I just see Christian Kirk in round 4, Brian Thomas in round 7, and think, if that ends up being pretty close, and certainly if it flips, then you've ended up with a massive, massive win. Ben, can I tempt you with a second tight end reach here?
Yeah, no, we can go that way. Burrow, you want to try to send?
I guess I'm just not that excited about Joe Burrow.
Okay, take Bowers then. I think when we take Higgins instead of Chase, because I think Chase can be fine. But if Higgins is right, it makes me think Burrow's right. But Burrow was a little bit of an ADP value there. He does go to the Chase drafter. We got Brock Bowers, which we needed to do to get our second elite tight end. I'm always comfortable with that. To get Bowers through, he would have needed to fall 3 picks behind his current ADP, and he's rising. So it seems very unlikely that he would have gotten back to us at 905, pick 101. His ADP's up to 98. A few weeks ago, maybe we could have tried to send Bowers back through to 905. But, some people like Sean, I'm looking at you, Sean, have caused his price to rise by taking him on Best Ball Banana Stand 12 picks before ADP every single week. So this is where we're at with Brock Bowers. We have to pass a discount on our T. Higgins Burrow stack because we can't pass Bowers through to round 9, which is fair. Brock
And this
Bowers
probably sounds silly, but I wanted this to be a Jaden Daniels team, but he does go. I think that this is the team that's going to win the 1.5 million.
You're so excited about this team. You wanted the best quarterback pick to be on it, and he goes ahead of ADP. That's cool that you're that pumped. I like that too. You just made a little move to bump Raheem Mostert to the top of the queue. You had some other guys starred there. Mostert's the ADP value. Yeah, why not take that swing? We're already in on Waddle. We're basically fading Tyreek Hill. If Hill goes out, it could be a Mostert Waddle season for the Dolphins, like somewhat easily. I mean, Achane would be involved too, but I continue to believe that Raheem Mostert in this range, we get him at 905 here. I've talked about him in the 8th round, in the 7th round in some drafts, still is probably like, I mean, you have a piece coming out about the most mispriced players. You tease that one of the top Dolphins running backs would be in it. I have an inclination that player might be Achane, Shawn, for you, but Mostert is, I mean, he led the NFL with 21 touchdowns last year. And I understand.
Then how are we in a world where someone who scored 21 touchdowns last year is going available
at 905 after pick 100? It doesn't, I mean, I understand he's 32 years old, but this is a great example. It's similar to the point we were making on our last Stealing Banana Shorts, where we're talking about the late round running backs, rookies, day 3 rookies, that like people are, it's just like a group think where it's like, well, they're day 3 rookies, so they can't produce, even if that's not really the truth or like what the data would suggest. And with Mostert, I mean, we certainly have this with old players too. And Shawn, we did this last year with some old receivers that we didn't want to be on. But I remember one of our first episodes last year, we were like, oh, well, this is going to be the old wide receiver season. And you and I ended up very heavy on Keenan Allen. I was Godwin over Mike Evans, but still took a decent amount of Mike Evans. I had a lot of Allen Evans teams. Those ended up being some of my best teams. The prices we're getting on some older players because people just don't want to play age is just bizarre. I understand Mostert's 32, but a point that I made earlier this offseason is that NFL player peaks are very unique. They are shorter than I think a lot of people expect them to be. Most of our age 30 running back data is for guys that were really great when they were 22, 23, 24, 25, and then they're 5 years later, and you're like, can they maintain what they were 5 years ago? Raheem Mostert was never anything until he was like 27, right? His first year with even more than 30 yards from scrimmage is his age 26 season, and that's a 286-yard season. His age 27 season, he has a 950-yard, 10-touchdown year with the Niners. He comes back, has 677 yards the next year. He gets hurt the year after that at age 29. His age 30 season, his first year in Miami, was his first 1,000-yard from scrimmage season of his career. He backed that up last year with 1,187 yards and the 21 TDs, which, by the way, were more touchdowns than he had scored his whole career to that point. He only had 19. I'm not suggesting he has like tread on the tires or any of that stuff. What I'm suggesting is, to the extent that Raheem Mostert ever had a peak, it's right now. He just had the best season of his career by an absolute mile. And the last 2 seasons are the only 1,000-yard seasons of his career. Maybe that ends immediately this year, but we're not expecting him to be something that he was 10 years ago. We're expecting him to be the player he was last season. He's in his prime at 32. There is age-related risk with that. But in terms of like age-related decline, he just had his best year. He's not declining. I mean, it's a different conversation. Maybe he's just a late peak player, and players like that do exist. Anyway, that's my rant for him. We're back on the clock. I'm very comfortable taking Chase Brown over Javonte Williams if you want. He's somebody that I know you're high on, and I have a lot of Chase Brown as well. You just moved Javonte ahead of Chase. Are you thinking we can maybe get Chase on the way back?
Yeah, I mean, probably not, but
yeah, I don't think we will because of the Bengals drafter in between. But if you like Javonte a lot, I mean, I really like Javonte a lot too. So we do take Javonte Williams there.
It's another 7-pick discount. A
nice discount on a running back that we've talked a lot about. We really like having exposure to. There's a Bengals stack here between us and the turn, and I don't think Chase Brown's likely to get past him twice. Also, just based on ADP, yeah, he does go 3 picks after us. I don't even think that was the Bengals stack that took him, but he is off the board, doesn't come back to us, would have needed to slide a little to get to us. Tyjae Spears was already off. Chase Brown is a nice pick in that range too. Both of the running backs are nice picks. But Kenneth Walker, Raheem Mostert, Javonte Williams is a really nice top 3 running backs to go with the receivers that we built out. We didn't get Kittle. Purdy's the little ADP value there. We could take Tua here, Sean, if you want to start thinking about QB at all.
I tell you what was too bad was that we did do that Brock Bowers reach, and then Njoku came back to us in round 10. So that would have been interesting.
At 116, that would have been a nice pick, yeah. And right behind him, Goddard and Freiermuth come off the board. Usually Njoku goes a little ways ahead of those guys. What were we going to say?
I think we're in good shape for Tua versus the Hill drafter.
Yeah, let's try to push him. Let's take Judy here. That's what you're going to say, right?
Yeah, Judy has. So we have both Waddle and Higgins, and that's the 16 and 17 for Cleveland.
And Mostert. Yeah, so now we have a nice Miami-Cleveland thing with Mostert, Waddle, and Judy. As you mentioned, the week 17, Higgins, Judy element. Tua's like right at his ADP here. We'd have to push him like 16 picks, but it's a gamble you can take with the pocket passers, especially because the only other Miami player drafted, as you were starting to say, is Tyreek Hill. And he's on the other side of us. He's at 104. We're at 105. And we have, Achane has also been drafted for Miami. But I doubt that drafter is like, that drafter started taking 2 quarterbacks as you go to the board. He took both Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff, stacked up some other players. It seems like a pretty good bet that we could get this nice discount on the slide on Tua.
It does. It'll be interesting. The next running back is Charbonnet, who I don't think that we necessarily are planning to take the step of handcuffing Kenneth Walker. But then with the 2 elite tight ends and these, I would say, 4 plus then the 2 wildcard receivers that I really like, but these 6 receivers, when you're able to get Kenneth Walker, Raheem Mostert, and Javonte Williams, you can just, you're probably not going to take too many of the best player available at tight end when you've already spent that much, but we're now set up to do whatever we want and add the most fun players onto this roster. But the power you have at running back, wide receiver, and tight end with this type of build, it really shouldn't be possible. But 2024 has set it up this way as a relatively consistent thing that can be executed.
Yeah, I do it in like every single draft. It feels I'm gonna be wrong if early running back is the right answer, but it feels like what you just said. It shouldn't be possible, and so it's just like the same build type with different names every single time. Jerry Jeudy's a guy we talked about recently, Sean, as probably belonging inside the wide receiver window. I would say I'm more comfortable taking him than Jameson Williams on a team, just from like a stability standpoint in best ball. I think Williams in a season-long league where I could cut him if he was a huge bust would make sense. Can you switch back to the other? A lot of pictures went off really quickly. We got back up. Tua did make it through. We should take him before Tyreek Hill's drafted, right? Okay.
Yeah, so we grabbed Tua there. That worked nicely. Brock Purdy also had a big fall and goes 11-12 to a drafter that doesn't have a 49er, I don't believe, but they did finally decide, look, that value for someone who's going to score a lot of points, and they didn't. They did have Josh Allen, but that was sort of an interesting play there. His ADP, I think, 111, his pick 132. So you will get some people taking him empty in that situation. I love getting Tua back through there.
We got fortunate to get Tua through, is what you're saying. But we got, what was the ultimate discount there? We got him at 140. Do you mind scrolling up over the
it's 17 picks.
17 picks, 123 ADP. So a little bit of patience there, not taking him and being willing to play late round quarterback if we had to. We get paid off. That was very nice. Several picks went off the board right away there, and I wasn't sure where we were at, but Tua was the one we were waiting on, and he did not come off in those names. The alternative that you already had in the queue was Marshawn Lloyd. Kendre Miller had gone before our last pick. It used to be Miller and Lloyd back-to-back. I take them in every draft. Miller's starting to rise a little bit, or I take one of them in every draft. It felt like Miller's starting to rise a little bit. Lloyd has really fallen in this room, and he makes it all the way back to us at 149. He's at a 141.8 ADP, which is still light. I love that if you're comfortable with it. He's
the only question would be if you want the Cousins pick with Pitts.
No, I don't. I mean, we can do something else. We have Malik Neighbors. We can take Daniel Jones. Marshawn Lloyd at pick 149 is more important to this build than Kirk Cousins, I think.
I don't know. Kirk Cousins can score a lot of points, and you've made the case that Kyle Pitts is going to lead the NFL in fantasy scoring. So it seems like those two guys are.
That's not a case that I recall making, but maybe that was, I don't know, one of our drinking streams, which I've, I don't know if we've had one of those, but I do think the Cousins Pitts, like the whole Atlanta, directional bet is a fun one to make. Cousins does come off a couple picks after us, so we don't get the big value there. But the Marshawn Lloyd thing, especially on a Jefferson team, Sean, because of the week 17 correlation there. And then also because we've gone with some veterans, some like projectable role with Mostert and Javonte Williams, more like early season production. The texture of our running back room. I mean, Kenneth Walker, Raheem Mostert, and Javonte Williams, it needed an upside rookie running back. I think Lloyd was a really fun slider to get at 149, about 8 picks behind an ADP that's at least 8 picks too low.
Yeah, I mean, are you still hearing, not that we're going to get a ton of new information now until training camp, but I mean, they plan, it's not going to be like a pure committee, but he has standalone value. I don't understand a player that has that much contingent value and has standalone value going at this price when, again, and we talked about some of the red flags in the rookie running back show in between our two drafts today, but the upside for him to me is off the charts.
Right. And you just asked, like, am I still hearing, and essentially that Lloyd's going to be, sort of a 1-2 punch. They've always used multiple backs. And I mean, like you said, we're not really going to get a lot more information, but to me, it was like that one quote that we got right after the draft. They're like, he's going to play alongside Jacobs was all I needed. Cause that's what, like, they basically just told you the answer. They were like, yeah, this is what we intend to do. That's why we took him on day 2. Sean, earlier in this long stream in our second Stealing Banana Shorts this week, we talked through the rookie running backs. We talked about how there was only 4 on day 2. Marshawn Lloyd was one of them. The Packers are one of the teams that did use a 3rd round pick, a little bit higher draft capital than anyone else. Not anyone else, but then all but 3 other teams in this draft class. I don't know how Lloyd, as a guy who did go on day 2, is being, I mean, they've told you that they're going to use him. They want to use 2 backs, but people in fantasy are just like, well, there's a lead running back and there's a backup. It's like, no, they're going to use them both. Yep.
And again, it's Josh Jacobs could be good. He's going to get a lot of touches. He did not run forward a lot last year, which
is an important thing for a running back. Well, they call it running back, Sean. You can run back.
I like it.
Kamani Vidal is the second player by ADP. We talked about him when we drafted him in the first draft we did this morning, and then a lot during our second Stealing Banana Shorts when we talked through those rookie running backs. No surprise that we like adding him to this build. This team, Sean, so Bucky Irving goes 3 picks later. He's the other one you had in the queue. There was some possibility he could have came back around and hit us in round 15. I feel like you can get Bucky Irving in round 15. He must have went a little bit ahead of ADP there.
He did.
But that's,
or maybe right at ADP.
We can't get every value that we wanted. There was a point where Bucky Irving was going pick 180 in every draft. I'm glad that he's risen a little bit. He deserves to, but good golly, that's
Yeah, I'm looking at the RotoViz ADP tool. He's at 1501 over the last 2 days. So right in that range. We're coming back around, and
do you want to just ruin all the karma on this team by taking Deshaun Watson?
Oh no, that wasn't what I was thinking.
I didn't think it was what you were thinking. I don't think you're ever going to draft him. Were you thinking one of the Broncos receivers?
I was.
Yeah. Let's do it.
That seems like the
I still think
fit.
do you think Mims should be going ahead of Franklin?
How
about you? When I say something like that, you click it and then you disagree after you already took the pick that I'm asking.
No, I mean, I have
disagree.
a lot of Franklin. I have a lot of Franklin, and I want us to get on these co-managed teams the player that you are leaning toward. For me, they're very close. It's that sort of age-old question of, do you want the second-year player who kind of busted but is theoretically in line for is ahead in the current line? Or do you want the rookie who maybe got drafted too late, so now you can't even count on that part of it, but hasn't busted yet, is coming off of a great season, and is maybe a higher upside potential number one for their passing game if things break the right way? I don't think it's an easy question to answer.
Wider range of outcomes for Franklin, for sure. It feels like sort of lower floor, that because the thing that is been, the concern for me is just that he did fall to day 3. That's more of a concern for me with the wide receivers. At the same time, they traded up to take him with the second pick of day 3. As soon as he fell through round 3, they said, we're going to make sure to get him tomorrow when the draft starts back up. And they went ahead and did that. And there's usually competition to trade into those first couple spots. I'm sure there's other teams that were calling. I can't even remember who traded back there, but they were calling whoever traded back, the team that had that second pick of the 4th round. And yet Denver did what they needed to do to go get that draft slot to tank Franklin, who has played with Bo Nix in college. It's just, from the moment they traded Judy, Sean Payton was like, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, Marvin Mims was bad enough as a rookie that I don't want to be all in on him. And then you're like, yeah, but every situation is slightly unique. And the unique element here is, from the moment that Payton traded Judy, he's been saying, we didn't do enough to get Marvin Mims on the field. In fact, before he traded Judy, he was like, it's because he plays the same position as Jerry Judy. And then they went and traded Jerry Judy. And then he's been saying all offseason, like, we really want to use Marvin Mims more. That's on us that he didn't play more in his rookie year. And he was efficient.
His targets per route were also terrible. But I mean, he had no problem throwing Russell Wilson under the bus. He's like, Russell Wilson couldn't give him the ball, so what's the point of having him out there? Then we are back around. Oh, yes, sorry. I was like, who do you want here, without knowing who's available?
Oh, should we just take Franklin? He made it
kind of fun play, I think.
Yeah, let's just do it and then take Nix.
Okay.
Let's take Mims and Franklin. I can't believe Franklin comes all the way back. He actually has a slightly higher ADP than Mims. We took Mims at pick 173, right on his ADP. His ADP is 173.6. Franklin's 171.2. He comes all the way back to 188, 17 picks behind his ADP. So now we have Javonte Williams and both Franklin and Mims. It makes Nix obviously now a priority into our quarterback build. So that pushes us also to what? 8. That was our 8th receiver. Our receivers now, I think, are very solid. The running backs are Walker, Mostert, Javonte, Lloyd, Vidal. We can probably get away with just 5 there, unless you want to do a 2 quarterback build and then take a 6th running back, which is an option as well.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, is that based on where we drafted them, 6 running backs would be a logical choice on this team. But based on who they are, I don't think that we need to be like, let's throw another name at it to have 6. If we don't like the options, we can definitely stick with what we've got.
That's how I feel. I think we can make our bets on Lloyd and Vidal, especially as the 4 and 5, because Walker, Mostert, and Javonte Williams, I feel like is plenty of like guaranteed touches. But I think what I would say is, let's take Nix here, and then some of the other QBs you have in the queue, JJ McCarthy, Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, see if any of those guys swing back to us Nix fits so well because we also have Higgins, remember, on this build. So we have the Javonte Williams, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, and the Week 17 bring back that all play into the Knicks thing that we earlier on this recording were very excited about the Knicks fit and talking a lot about what it could mean for the Broncos this year, that he could be a guy who's actually like a statistical ceiling. We're talking about him as a top 10, passing yardage player in the NFL this year, right away as a rookie. I don't think there's a lot of people that are saying that. I think a lot of people who hear that would think that we're crazy for saying it, Shawn, but it is something that we're not completely out on as being feasible. I mean, you said he was going to be top 5 or no, leading the NFL, I think is the first, story you were telling, and we had to revise that to top 10. But Daniel Jones does go. We would have had him with Malik Neighbors. We have JJ McCarthy with Justin Jefferson. We have Justin Fields as just a swing. I don't mind a third QB here. It seems like you're leaning toward a 6th running back. Is that fair?
Not necessarily. I have sort of put the cue here of Tank Bigsby, who has a different buy and I think a lot of contingent upside. I have a hard time clicking on him because I don't think he's that good, but I also think that, but somewhere in between where people were buzzing about him last year and where they're completely disinterested this year, or I should say uninterested, is probably more where he goes. And he's interesting because I think he would be actually a pretty big bell cow if we got an injury from ETN, which I don't even want to think about. I have Estime on here because I think that he actually is kind of an interesting sort of handcuff play to Javonte Williams for this roster. And McCarthy is a hard pick, but I mean, McCarthy also makes sense.
I'm a little worried about Tua and Nick's fragility there. I do think Estime makes sense as well, but I guess I'm just like, and he shares a bye with Tua, but I mean, Nick should be playing that week. I could go either way with it. If you feel comfortable with Tua and Nick as the 2 QBs, that feels fragile to me. So we'll
go ahead with McCarthy. One reason I don't think McCarthy's week 6 bye matters is I don't think he's going to be playing by week 6. So he's out for those weeks anyway. But once he gets in there, I don't think it's the same case as the case for Knicks where he's going to light it up. But the thing that you were mentioning about the offense and the floor of the offense and how that offense runs when they do go to him, and they're going to go to him in a section of the year where I would expect him to be the starter before TJ Hawkinson is healthy, but you would also hope that there's a lot of overlap with that and that he is surrounded by incredible weapons. If we're going to make the Justin Jefferson play in round 1, I don't see how you get away from JJ McCarthy in round 18 when your other 2 quarterbacks are Tua and Bo Nix.
And one of the things that you want to do when you go to the 3 quarterback builds, and this is something that Mike Leone's work over the last couple of years has shown, is if you can, you want to try to stack all 3 of them. And something that I absolutely love about this is not only do we stack all 3 of them, we have bringbacks on all 3 of them. So we have the Tua with Waddle, and it's got the Jerry Jeudy, and so we have a Miami-Cleveland thing. It also has Mostert. Whole Miami-Cleveland thing built out. I talked about the Bo Nix one with Javonte Williams, both the later round receivers, Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin, and it has T. Higgins coming back as their Week 17 opponent. And then J.J. McCarthy with Justin Jefferson, and we had Marshawn Lloyd in the mid-round as a bring back on the Packers. All of that, I mean, if this team does make the final, Shawn, the Best Ball Mania final, to have 3 different quarterbacks game stacked is a pretty tremendous and exciting element to the way it'll work. And as you pointed out sort of throughout, like we had Jeudy and Higgins as a Week 16 element. Like there's going to be some other stacks in there too. I don't know how it all fits together. I'm like excited to look at the schedules because this is a team that I really like, and it's a really fun build. I imagine there's some fun Week 15 and Week 16 stuff in here as well.
Yeah, I mean, that Kenneth Walker pick is the Week 16 off of Minnesota. And so one of the things that I do like to do is, play that NFC North, even if you don't know what all the buys are and all the Week 16, 17 elements are. If you're doing it on your phone as you're running, you're executing, different weird types of things, you decide to hang out and watch TV and not even pay attention, you can end up with rosters that work pretty nicely just having played through the NFC North there. And then, Ben, certainly I don't want to act like this was all automatic and we built it this way 100% as the result of intent as opposed to letting it develop. But I'm very glad that we passed on Joe Burrow, even though I agree with your comment that if T. Higgins hits, it is probably a little bit unlikely that Joe Burrow doesn't hit, because passing on that there allows you to play it from the other side. It allows you to play it from the Denver side. And one of the things that happened to me and Pete yesterday was that taking Burrow to go with Jamar Chase, even though the price was fine, right? You get a good price on him. It still kind of broke everything else we were trying to do because we couldn't afford to have that single digit pick at quarterback. This team was not going to run into exactly that same problem. And yet not having that single digit quarterback allows us to get the second elite tight end, which then not only do I think it increases our upside, but increases our flexibility with the build the entire rest of the draft.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I also found another week 16 bring back, Sean. Our guy Bo Nix in the big Broncos thing that we have built out. We have Kamani Vidal, the Chargers Broncos week 16 in LA. That's our biggest stack. So we have Nix with Vidal in week 16 and Higgins in week 17. And Nix has 3 players with him because he's going to throw 3 touchdowns, 1 to each of Javonte Williams, Marvin Mims, and Troy Franklin in both of those games. This team's super fun. It was a fun one. Let's go through the final build again real quick for the listeners. Justin Jefferson was the 101. Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors. We talked through really liking those first 3 teams. First 3 picks. You like when you love a start and then things come together the rest of the way. T. Higgins in round 4 is a nice value in late 4. We talked about kind of thinking he's a tier break, and some receivers behind that tier break go up ahead of him to push him down. Kyle Pitts early in 5 to get that elite tight end element. Kenneth Walker, Brian Thomas, a great value on him in 7. Brock Bowers early as well. So we get Pitts, Bowers, 2 tight ends we obviously love, and we're okay to pay a little bit to make that happen. Got great values everywhere else to offset that, as you talked through. Raheem Mostert, Javonte Williams in that running back pocket you want to be hitting. Jerry Jeudy gives us another wide receiver mixed in. We've talked about him as being a guy who belongs in the in front of the wide receiver window, but you get to take him after pick 120 for reasons that are not really clear. Tua Tagovailoa completes the Miami stack. We push him all the way around. Take Jeudy right at Tua's ADP. Push Tua, get him at a 17 pick discount, I think it was. Marshawn Lloyd, Kamani Vidal, 2 of the favorite running backs to target in that other really fun running back area where you can get so many young, exciting names. We don't get like a Kendre Miller on this team. But there's one thing I'm upset about. It's the thing that you always talk about when you draft these teams you love. You want all your favorite guys on that team because you're like, this is the Kendre Miller season. I also want him on this team. This is the Bucky Irving season. I want him on this team. We didn't get those guys, but we did get Jalen Wright. We didn't get him, although we have Raheem Mostert. Anyway, we got Marshawn Lloyd and Kamani Vidal. We got a couple of the guys in that pocket that we love. And then we go Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Bo Nix, build out the Denver thing, tack on JJ McCarthy to make it a 3 QB build. I think it might be my favorite team we've drafted this year so far, or that I've drafted anywhere. It's because I'm just so into the various ways that we played this. I love playing Miami. I love playing Denver. I don't like JJ McCarthy on the back of this either, but I think in round 20 or 18, you got to think about a third QB in this build. And basically every other pick we made is one that I feel pretty good about. I like the values that we're getting and the places that we're getting them. I don't even know. If I was going to be bummed about something, it's this team doesn't have a Kansas City Chief on it. I think the Chiefs receivers are so undervalued. I'm taking one of them in every single draft. And there's the little things where it's just there's more stuff I would have liked to throw into this team that I think are good values because it's got everything else that I love. Man, it's a fun team. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I was looking to see where Xavier Worthy went in this one. It was the 5'11". That was the round where we did pick Pitts. Yeah, I agree. I mean, this team is so much fun. And the things that you're most likely to be wrong about, I think you want to be very aware of price. And so to have the Mims, Franklin, Nix part in weeks 15, 16, and 17, and have it be kind of a still a very tight play with the rest of the roster, but one that we didn't pay a lot for, and one where we don't need Mims and Franklin to score early, because if there's anything weird about this team, it's probably the actual overinvestment in receivers. This is a roster where we have the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then interesting names in Thomas and Judy. Unless they go off for massive games, if Mims and Franklin are scoring early, then we've got some other problems, actually. So
yeah.
this is a nicely constructed roster from that perspective, where we got the players we like. But I mean, Ben, one of the reasons this came out so well is that other than the 2 tight end reaches, which were, very intentional, and certainly anytime people take people ahead of ADP, they're like, well, we didn't do it by accident. It was intentional. Obviously, it's always the case. But we got very good ADP values across the rest of the roster.
You make a great point about the receiver stuff. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if we were going to work completely back to front and how this all came together, it's so funny because I was actually really excited about the Brian Thomas pick because of the value it was at, and I'm not getting a lot of exposure to him, but I'm talking about wanting all of my favorite plays on this build, and he's not one of my favorite plays this year, and he doesn't really correlate with anything else. There's one pick, knowing that we got Mims and we got a great deal on Franklin and it's all correlated late, I'd probably swap out the Brian Thomas pick and throw Jonathan Brooks in there in the 7th round. And then you get, that 6th running back and a little bit more later season upside. That would have been a really fun, 1v1 change to make had we known in round 7 that we were going to get future wide receiver values that were all going to correlate. And we were going to, because very rarely do you finish a draft and you're like, man, wide receiver came together the way that we planned, in the later rounds and everything. We got all the values we wanted. The Judy thing worked, and we didn't pay for it with Tua coming back around. And so at the point we're on the clock with Thomas, there's no world where I would have thought that we should pass on him, because I would have thought that everything would come together later as it did. It's just purely in hindsight, 100% in hindsight. It'd be like, yeah. I mean, we could have taken a gamble on Jonathan Brooks there and then gotten totally lucky later, and then it would have been an even better build. That's the only thing I'll say.
Yeah, I agree with your take about a chief receiver in every draft. I think you should do what you can to get a Texans wide receiver in every draft. The tricky part there, obviously, is that they are extremely expensive. But just like last year, Pete's plan from a season ago, take a Dolphins running back in every draft. Yeah, Achane is more expensive, but is he prohibitively expensive? Now, he went fairly early in this one, looking at his actual ADP of 212. I mean, again, you can do that very consistently, and I love the fact that we have Raheem Mostert on this team, even though emotionally the guys I'm hoping hit this season are probably Achane or the guy we talked about in the rookie show, Jalen Wright. I don't know. I mean, Raheem Mostert doesn't even have to have a good season to easily pay off this draft price.
Yeah. I mean, he really doesn't. That's one of the things I've been thinking about with him, where it's like, okay, even if people are right and they're clearly predicting that he's going to have a serious injury, even if they're right and he has a serious injury by if that comes later, if it's like week 8, I mean, he's going to have given you enough usable weeks through that point that he's going to pay off this price. If you have some back-weighted production from, we have Vidal and Marshawn Lloyd late, if those guys wind up being a big 1-2 punch down the stretch, Mostert's still going to be huge to help advance the team at that point. And I think people also, because Mostert has had some serious injuries, they're assuming he's definitely going to have a season-ending injury. And it's like, well, what if he just has what if he misses some time and comes back late in the? I'm trying to think through how his price makes sense. So I'm already defaulting to he's going to miss time, which doesn't have to happen. That was the point I was driving home when we took him. He's kind of in his prime. He just stayed healthy all last year and had the best year of his career. But even if we assume he gets hurt, what if he only gets hurt for like, I don't know, only quote unquote 5 or 6 weeks and then comes back and is actually a big part of their offense down the stretch because they trust him. They're going to use him. One of the things I think you can knock Jalen Wright about is I don't think he has a path to just beating out Mostert. I think they really like Raheem Mostert. I think Mike McDaniel particularly really likes Raheem Mostert, and he's going to use him. I mean, I think you can even knock Achane a little bit to that respect. I think you need Mostert to get banged up a little bit, not fully, and certainly not for Achane, who's going to get his touches and his work, I think, regardless, because he's so explosive. But it's not like Mostert's going to get benched. That's the point that I would drive home. It's more like you're betting on him to not hold up. There's other situations where it's less certain to me, but with a veteran like this who knows the system as well as he does and has been as efficient as he's been, I mean, he would have to really show signs of age in a way that I don't think we have any reason to believe, because last year he didn't even start to show that. He still was running, when you look at his clocked rates, his miles per hour, all that stuff, still running at a really high speed on the field and ball carrier speed and all that, the next gen stats, et cetera. I don't know. He's one of the most unique plays in 2024 fantasy football. We don't like to draft 32-year-old running backs usually, but I'm going to draft one. I'm going to draft one who scored 20 touchdowns last year, was still running at a super high, ball carrier speeds, and had the best season of his career last year, and looks like he might actually be in his prime at 32.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that even those of us who tend to fade the older players, want to keep in mind is what is the price and what happened in the previous season. Because, just like for the younger players, the trap you can get caught in is expecting peak age players to go on indefinitely or that they're locked in. The guy's previous season is the one that's going to be the strongest indicator of what he does for you this year. Ben, this has been an absolute blast. We were able to do an eliminator draft, which is one of our absolute favorites. We went through some of the advanced stats on rookie running backs, which is, I think, especially important to make sure you're very well calibrated on during this slightly less hype oriented time of the year. So you've got that good basis before we get into training camp. And we're starting to hear that every player is either the greatest player of all time or they're fourth or fifth on the depth chart and have no chance. Both of those things are likely to be at least partially untrue. You want to know what they've been, how good they probably are. And then we got to finish with a BBM 5 draft that we both agree maybe one of our all-time favorites. We're going to keep a close eye on this team and see what it does during the season. But thanks so much for those of you who are listening to the full audio and have stayed with us for the 3 hours here. It's been so much fun. I'm Shawn Siegele. With me as always is Ben Gretchen. You can follow at Yards Per Gretch, at Stealing Signals, at Stealing Lines. Ben has a fantastic new YouTube product that he has been putting out, hosting shows with folks. You can get in there and interact with him. The Stealing Signals YouTube is gaining new subscribers at a huge rate every day. Join that, subscribe over there, look for his shows. We'd love to have you guys at RotoViz. The coupon code there if you want to save some money and look at some of these SIS stats that we talked about on the show. RV Radio 2024, you get 10% off your 1-year subscription. We also love to share RotoViz Overtime with you. Colin Kell and I putting out 3 shows a week as well. Thanks everybody who is leaving those ratings and reviews. They help us a ton with the algorithm. When you're interacting with Ben, leave some comments, leave some likes, give some nice feedback there. That also helps him out with the algorithm as he builds that channel up. Those things are very, very much appreciated. We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon.